Every episode of The Angry Chicken is made possible by our amazing patrons over at patreon.com/tag. For more of Jocelyn's content, check out jossplays.com. And if you can't get enough of Ridiculous Hat, follow him over on Twitter at Ridiculous Hat. The Angry Chicken is a production of A Move TV.
Time's up. Let's do this.
Legendary!
You face Jaraxxus. You smell like a leopard gnome. I knew it. So hot. A podcast about Hearthstone and Battlegrounds. This is The Angry Chicken.
Hello and welcome to episode 495 of The Angry Chicken. It is January 18th, and I am your host and anchor for a little while, Ridiculous Hat. You won't hear Joce this week, as many of you may have seen on social media, and many of you may have not, so I'm going to tell you right now. Joce will be off for a few weeks. She's doing her last embryo transfer. She has given it her full energy, full focus, Joce. We wish you the best of luck. We will miss you. And in the meantime, I'm holding down the fort here, but it's not just me. We have some wonderful guests lined up, and our first wonderful guest we are joined by is Mr. Pocky Plays. Pocky, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I was so excited. We were just talking about it, but I just love talking. I mean, especially with people in the community. I mean, the Hearthstone community is so good. Obviously, you're insanely active. You know, everyone knows the Angry
It's
Chicken.
dangerous.
So this is super cool.
Really glad to have you on. Thank you for being here, and you are our Battlegrounds expert, which is important because we just got a huge Battlegrounds patch. So
Huge.
We're going to talk about that, but first we want to give our thanks to our patrons over at patreon.com/TAC. We are supported directly by our epic patrons. You can become a patron by going to patreon.com/TAC. Gives you access to the TAC Discord server. And thank you so much, patrons, for your continued support. We really appreciate you. All right, Pocket, we got to get to know you before we start to get to know this patch. So, tell us the role, the vibe that you channel in the BG scene. Who is Pocky in a nutshell?
That's a good question. So I mean, there's a lot of different roles that I kind of bridge. Maybe that's it. Maybe I'm a bridge. I play at a pretty high level. My peak is rank 11. I didn't push for rank 10. I know that sounds crazy. I got there and I was happy, and I was playing 2 servers at that point. So I've been front page on NA and EU at the same time. So I've done the high level stuff. But of course I like streaming. I like doing the fun stuff more than anything else. I don't have as much of the mindset, but if it comes to like, hey, I'm a big fan of like Khadgar. RIP to our friend Khadgar in Battlegrounds. Maybe a spoiler on the changes there, but miss that guy. But like APM Pirates, all that sort of stuff, and then and then like knowledge and networking. I mean, I've been around now enough that I think most of the people in the high level Battleground scene sort of know me, and people often come into my stream. They're like, "Oh my god, all the high level players are hanging out here." I'm like, yeah, it's like industry hours. So all the where all the bartenders go after bar close. That's my stream. It's not huge, but we have good vibes, and I like to foster that. Just have everyone hanging out and stuff. So I guess, yeah.
I want to make sure I clarify something I heard. I don't have that grind set. I got 11th place while I was playing 2 servers at the same time. And that's
okay.
You get a
Look,
little grind set.
It sounds impressive, but when I play, like, I was sure you like sometimes you watch another player and you're like, wow, I'm not on their level. The gap between me and those like really, really, really top players is huge. Like I can look at it and be like, I have no problem being like, I'm never gonna be on that level, right? I can try and understand it, but when it comes down to playing and into action, XQN, Beater, G, some of these players that you just always see up at the top. No, there's a gulf. There's a gulf between me and them, regardless of where I am on the leaderboards. So,
But what we have, but what we
it's
have
okay.
from you,
I'm okay with that.
yeah, that's. I mean, you're doing just fine, and still, we're talking about margins at the very, very high end of the game. And like you said, and like we talked a little bit about pre-show, where you've positioned yourself instead is the information person. That you have these
Absolutely.
really, really long patch review threads. And just whenever anything's going on BGs, I'm like, I better check out Pocky. I better see what's going on. And you have the info on the bugs. You have the info on new interactions. Just the rule book kind of guy, and the known issues poster for this universe. So, what prompted you to become this hub of information? And congratulations, by the way, on your recent follower milestone.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, hit 2,000 followers on Twitter. Working up towards you. It's a that maybe is the actual grind, but
It takes a while.
I yeah, yeah, it does. I just I've always had a passion, so I've always liked strategy games, and I sucked at them. Like I was good at the strategy part, but the mechanics and stuff like StarCraft, man, couldn't get there. Dota couldn't get there. Like strategy, perfect. I can draft great teams, all this stuff. I can see patch reviews. I can see like, hey, this is gonna be strong. Like they made this nerf, this buff. Like, how's that gonna play out? That was always like something I was really interested in. Then I came around to Battlegrounds. I'm like, this is all the strategy and the background of card games. I played Yu-Gi-Oh and stuff. It was a really great balance where I could contribute that knowledge, that strategy mindset to something that didn't care about mechanics. And then no one really took over those like in-depth patch reviews, right? Like people would go over and say, oh, this is a change, this is a change, but like, how's that going to play out in the meta? What are these weird interactions that maybe we don't see if you just go through it over 15 minutes, right? Like you only catch on if you're like thinking about it for 2 hours, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, this is like meta breaking. That sort of stuff is what interested me, and so I just being the person there, people brought me information, said, hey, I'm gonna go break in Pocky's patch review and drop this knowledge bomb, and I get to reap the rewards of everyone else bringing me that information. So I guess that's how I ended up there.
I shared your most recent Pocky's patch notes in the show notes if anyone wants to check it out. It is extensive. It is exhaustive. Has been very helpful to me so far in just learning the new meta. And we're gonna do a lot of BG's strategy today, listeners. So if you're into that, you're in the right place. I wanted to pick your brain a little bit on if you had to pick. If you look over the past year, it's January. We get to do a year in review sort of thing for BG's. I want to see if you can point to any one thing that really stood out to you in a positive way, the thing you enjoyed the most, and maybe one thing that you think there's some major opportunity to work on, something that caused you any concern or desire for change.
That is a great question. I really, really enjoyed quests. I did. I think I get excited. Like I'm not the player that's super concerned about balance per se, right? Like if something comes in out of whack, that's okay. But like the mechanics of how things work, super interesting. So we had prizes, the Dark Moon Fair prizes. We had buddies. Those were a big thing. That was actually that was within the last year, I think, right?
Exactly
Like
1 year ago. It was last January.
right. So that was within the year, and then quests were our sort of third like event mechanic, and I thought they were by far the best. They sort of equalized hero balance and allowed you more choice within the game, right? There's a bigger decision tree when at a certain point you choose your quest, and it can impact what direction you want to take your game. And that was super cool to me. Hero balance, just as a byproduct more than anything else, got really good. And so I thought that was fantastic. That was probably my favorite thing happened in a long time. And conversely, I am very worried about hero balance because right now we don't have quests to sort of even it out. Obviously, getting into the more dramatic end, now we have sort of a mandatory pay for perks aspect in Battlegrounds, which I'm not the person that's like super against it, but the more there is an incentive to get good heroes, the more that does sort of impact the community in having those perks available, because X hero is tiers above everything else, and so making sure that we continue to balance heroes, which is very challenging. We have, I don't know, probably closing in on 90 some heroes or something. Like, there's a lot, and that's just difficult, and especially like across MMRs and all that sort of thing. So I would
I tried to
probably
count them all and I
highlight
got
that
dizzy. Like,
as
there's a lot of
my
heroes.
my concern. Yeah, I probably couldn't even name them all anymore. Like, I had missed some, just like, oh yeah, I forgot that was a hero. For sure. I mean, Professor Putricide's the new one. That was one that was gone for a long time. Now just finally making its return after a couple of years on the bench.
Yeah, I mean, I basically consider this a new hero because it's the new art. It's Potion Master Putricide instead of the original one, which was
Right.
plus 10 attack to the left minion and then plus 20. And it was the second time it came back, it was by accident and they hot fixed it out. It's such a weird experience. But yeah,
Yeah.
the hero balance, we remember it was kind of memed on, where they said the same article that they released the post about runestones and the mandatory perks. They said, we're committed to hero balance. Lots of memes there. Were you not committed before? That sort of thing. But then, like you said, quests, inherently speaking, along with the armor system, there were so many invisible factors moving that the range of performance was really compressed. And you had some players, I think RDU pretty notably said, the bad heroes are the good ones because you have the more armor and your quests are done faster. So it became this really interesting dynamic thing. And now it seems like, well, we're really going to test paid hero selection and no balancing mechanism. We're going to pull the safety net and see what happens. Stats are way too early, so it's hard to say, other than the heroes that were hotfixed out for bugs, exactly what's going to dominate. But, I'm sure you have some theories.
Yeah, for sure. Some of them being some of those hotfix heroes. Obviously, if you guys missed it, it was Tess, Scabs, Tamsin, and Illidan, along with Murzon. They got hotfixed outside here. We're looking for those heroes. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about those. Don't you worry. I have that in my known issues list. Some of the strangest bugs I've seen so far. Very entertaining, if I'm being honest. But speaking of very entertaining, you got to cast Lobby Legends. What was that like for you? I mean, it seems like it's right up your alley of the thing you want to do and the guy you want to be.
Oh, it absolutely was. Speaking about a year in review, it was last year. This was our first year of Lobby Legends.
You're right.
And I remember saying, like I said, I'm not the player that wants to, spend hours and hours playing the game just to eke out a few extra MMR, try and qualify for, like, that is not me. But I absolutely love high level gameplay. So being able to cast it, that was perfect. And so I said last year, before it came out, my goal was to cast Lobby Legends, and I had the opportunity to cast the last one of the year. It was a huge blast. I just want to do it again. I want to cast every Lobby Legends. So hopefully I'll get that opportunity. I'm looking forward to the esports announcement like everyone else very eagerly. But yeah, absolutely. It was just one of the coolest opportunities I had all of last year, all of my Hearthstone career, really. So really excited about that.
Being on the main broadcast seems, well, I mean, I don't know the feeling, but it seems pretty rad to, like, be on TV sort of thing. And especially just to help break down exactly what's going on in these high-level games and make it more accessible. It's a challenging thing to do. So I hope to see you back there, too, when we get this esports announcement, whenever that comes through. It should be this week. Abar said 2 weeks ago, so it should be this week, but we'll see. Well, I think we've gotten to know you a little bit here, but for those that want to get to know Pocky better, twitch.tv/PockyPlays. Go check it out. Go drop a follow. If you got a Twitch Prime, you can drop it there. He'll take it off your hands while you're around. And then we're going to talk about some news. BG's heavy, but there's some other stuff going on.
Yeah.
Good news, everyone!
So the 25.2 patch is out, and there's a lot of BG stuff. We talked about the units pretty extensively last week, so we'll go into strategy later on. But for now, we just want to go over some things that we maybe didn't know about. Like, for example, the damage cap. The damage cap, I think they made a really nice update here. Instead of it just being a hero has died, it's now a hero has died, and the game has reached the 10 gold turn. So someone disconnects early on, you can't just get whomped by someone that high rolls a 6, like a Eternal Summoner or something like that.
Yeah, it's a really good change for the game. I mean, you don't want games dictated by, oh, someone disconnected, totally different game. It doesn't make any sense. Like, it's a simple change, but I'm really glad they did it. And I have noticed once or twice that it has mattered in my games already. So, cool change. Very happy about it.
Yeah, just seems like a nice little quality of life thing. And we've got some other things. The armor is now overlaid on top of the life bars on the side. It's kind of a nice thing. Not a huge deal, but hey, it's better than before where we didn't have it.
It's so nice to be able to see. I'm not a huge fan of the design UI of it. I don't know. It just looks kind of ugly, but huge fan of being able to see, hey, they have more than the 40s. So really good change overall.
Yeah, it looks like a silver Sharpie, and I'm sure they'll clean it up, but it definitely looks like someone just took a Sharpie and just colored it in. But hey, listen, we got it at a glance. Works. There is a new event, the Lunar New Year. It is BG's focus, so make sure you click into that, collect your skins. Lots of cool skins. There is a lot of skin stuff, like cosmetics going on. There's a new BG skin. It's only 200 runestones in the shop. It's it's a Lich King skin. Looks pretty cool. There's drops. There are drops on Hearthstone channels. So go watch those over the course of the next week or two and get your Lightkeeper's Irella skin. Really rad. Free. As long as you just have a window open, you watch Hearthstone for the next week and a half or so. And there are some standard skins in the shop. Hohenheim Mountain, Spirit Brew Khan, and Omen, who's like a Cerberus, like a Hellhound, but for Demon Hunter. He looks pretty cool. So check those out. There is also another skin coming to the game. Inside Heroic Brawl, there's a little bit of controversy around this one. The skin inside Heroic Brawl, the first time Heroic Tavern Brawl has offered a reward beyond just the gold and the dust. For those that don't know, Heroic Tavern Brawl is 1,000 gold to enter. And it's when you get 3 losses, you're out. Up to 12 wins, big rewards of 12 wins, but this is not match made based on anything other than win count, so it is very sharky. Extremely sharky. There are sharks in these waters. It's very dangerous. So do not go in unless you're prepared to lose the money you spend. This time, if you win 3 games, you get Ghoul Queen Scarlet, the first Death Knight skin, and the first woman that's a Death Knight, and it looks pretty cool. There's also a legendary quest for players to win 1 game of any type in order to get a standard pack, so you don't have to worry about missing out on your pack. You skip the brawl. However, and there's actually an update that I didn't see before. The Ghoul Queen Scarlet skin legendary quest will require 3 wins in this Heroic Tavern Brawl across all runs, not necessarily in the same one. So
I actually didn't see that either.
I think
that's kind
new.
of a big difference, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It's still.
It's still gated, and you still do have to win. Could be a little spendy, but
it's better than I thought it was going to be. But there's still some concern. This is a very difficult event, and many players who are compelled by the idea of having to pay 1,000 gold and get this cosmetic, if they've never done it before, may be in for a rude awakening with the quality of opponent that you run into. And it's, that's basically $10 each entry. So I'm a little concerned about the idea that the awesome cosmetic that a lot of players will want is being dangled, and it might be harder to get to and might be acquired in a way that requires players spending a bunch of gold right before the mini set. But at least the initial feedback when it was you have to get 3 wins in the same run, that was more concerning to me. This, like, I don't love it, but it's a better compromise than what I was anticipating here. Still somewhat controversial, and, there have been suggestions about make this play 3 games instead, and also there have been requests to put the reward structure in the client. I think that's a reasonable request. I'm not sure if it's technically possible, but I think it's a reasonable request to have the reward structure in the client.
Yeah, it sure is, in my opinion. I mean, the monetization of Hearthstone's always been a really challenging topic overall, and yeah, I mean, it's a weird one because the heroic brawls just historically of it's such a, like you said, it's sharky, right? I mean, if you can do it, if how you stack up, a great event, but then everyone else is kind of fodder at that point. So you don't want to encourage too many people to just throw away gold. Like you said, it's not it's a tangible amount, especially with the mini set coming up. Those, generally what, 2,000 gold, right?
Yep.
So
yeah,
it's a chunk.
It feels a little weird. I do like the idea that there is a way to reward performing well with an exclusive cosmetic that you get to show off. And if this wasn't the first woman Death Knight skin, then it would probably be a lot less contentious. But it is, and a lot of people are going to enter because they want it. Something that we should at least talk about.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, there's a big thing. I mean, it's not talked I mean, it is talked about actually a lot. But one thing that I, as a content creator, that I've really worked towards is bringing more women into the game, and having representation goes a long way to that. One of the things I complain about, we still don't have like a normal woman Battlegrounds bartender for years, and Sliss is also super vocal about it. One of my favorite cards in Standard was Barista Lynchen, and I'm like, how is that not a Battlegrounds bartender?
Seems kind of free, right?
And
like she's a
it's already there.
barista.
It's already there.
So you just ask, like, what is the problem? Put her in the game.
Right.
Yeah.
I really don't know, but it is a big thing for, if a player, I mean, Death Knight's brand new. If you have these people that want to feel represented playing the new, class, and you're gating that behind something that could, it's not even just a matter of money, right? It's you have to work for it, and like you said, it's a little bit different now that we know that it's 3 overall wins, which is, I think it's pretty achievable if you sort of work towards it. But gating representation there feels, there could have maybe been a better approach on this one, or maybe just a different skin that, like you said, that you're gating, that maybe is more highlighting the achievement, right?
Yeah, it's either way, I'm glad that they added this correction, and hopefully people don't have to spend too much gold to get it, but at least it is more within reach. We don't have standard changes in this patch, though I will note about 10 minutes before the show, we did get a tweet from Aleko, who shared, I'll read this out for you. Hey everyone, I know a lot of you have been asking about standard balance changes. We're putting together a pretty big patch for about a week from now. In all honesty, I wish we could have shipped this patch a little sooner. The holiday break pushed our patch schedule, but the meta doesn't take a holiday, so I empathize with players who feel like this patch is coming late. Though I can't promise anything right now, we're chatting as a team about if we can adjust our patch cadence next holiday break. Hope you all enjoy the upcoming patch. So, should be next week. That's the plan. It'll be nice to see about when we expected, because typically speaking, correct me if I'm wrong, about a little over a week after each major BG's patch, about 9 days, the following Thursday is when we usually get the update. It can shift by a day here, a day there, based on American holidays, but it's usually Tuesday BG's patch, play a full weekend, get adjustments the following Thursday. We've seen that many times, and that seems to be the schedule that we're on here. So, we'll see what happens. We do have some known issues with some weird stuff. So, like we mentioned in the pre-show, there are a few heroes that have been disabled. Scabs, Tess, Tamsin, Illidan, and Murozond. There was maybe the oddest bug I have ever seen. When you would Murozond, Scabs, or Tess a Putricide minion, you would become Lord Nefarian.
Because why not? I mean,
There are a bunch of reasons.
Speaking of removed heroes and stuff, yeah.
Like, you would become Lord Victor Nefarian from the single-player content. It would pop up in a very strange Discover. You would gain 30 armor, and, I don't know what exactly happened. It was goofy. So, they turned that stuff off. They also disabled Illidan and Tamsin because the Sin Runner Blanchie, I believe, the undead beast, the tier 5 4/4 with Reborn, and it came back with full buffs and stats. What would happen with Illidan and with Tamsin, you could kill the base copy of Blanchie before combat. It would come back without Reborn, be granted Reborn by a Soul Splitter at the start of combat, and then it would have Reborn as a buff. So when it came back, it would bring back the buff of having Reborn. So it would Reborn and Reborn and Reborn and Reborn and literally infinite. They took that out. Can't do that.
Infinite interactions, huh?
It
Something
seemed
we love in Hearthstone.
a little dangerous, so they turned it off. It is unclear if that was related to the purported desyncs, but either way, that was hotfixed out immediately. I'm sure we'll see them back in the near future. There are also a couple undocumented updates to constructed cards. Magister's Apprentice, which was the 3/2 mage common that reduced the cost of all your arcane spells by 1, turned into a 2/3. Why? We don't know. Blizzard does not seem to know either. Nick tweeted about it and said it's one of the sillier bugs we've seen, and they're working on it. Also, Sun Fury Clergy. I'm going to say what that card is because you might not know. It's a 3 mana 2/4 that restores 3 health to all of your stuff and Mana Thirst 6 health. It has Rush now. Why? We don't know. But it does. So, okay. This is all the information we have. It's kind of funny and strange that a BG's patch would just randomly change some standard cards, but here we are. So I'm sure this will be fixed in the nearest future. And also, neither of these are particularly
it's
impactful
so funny
on
how
standard.
this stuff happens.
Software is hard.
It's
It's hard.
yeah.
Listen, sometimes you flip some stats, sometimes you turn into fairy, and we don't know what's going on around here. It's fine. It's fine. So, few other brief notes. The BG's event happened last week, the streamer invite thing. The structure was very ambitious with the teams and the trading and all that stuff. It was hard to keep track of the structure, but I will say the gameplay itself was fun, and getting all these people in streaming, theory crafting, whatever you want to call it, was fun. I don't anticipate that structure coming back, but it was, it was
Ambitious
a
is a
valiant
great
effort.
way to put it.
Yeah, a valiant effort.
It's easy for it to sound super sarcastic or, snide, but I do appreciate, ambitious format attempts at, tournaments in general. It doesn't always work. Sometimes standard is good, but it was interesting. I'm with you. It was hard to follow. Usually I'm I'm a huge nerd about how does the formatting work? How does this impact? I looked at that, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna follow. I can't break this one down in my head. This one's too hard. XD actually came into me and asked, he's like, what's the strategy? I'm like, I don't know. Good luck. But it was cool. The gameplay was cool. I love the preview events that they've been doing. And yeah, we'll see. We'll see what the next one is. Maybe they'll try something ambitious again, different, but still ambitious. Because there's not like huge competitive stakes. Like what's the downside? I will say the downside in this case was there was seemingly a lot of downtime, so they didn't get as many games in. But and I want to see it casted next time, whether by me or anyone else. Would love to see that event sort of get more sort of main channel publicity or something.
I would agree in those points. The downtime was what was really the thing to me. You could just see the players kind of struggling with the format and what do I do and when is this over. I have to imagine it was fairly challenging on the admins. And, some amateur casting, there are a lot of people that'll just do these things and it don't have to be asked for much more than their time. And I'm sure there could be some, like, I don't know what Blizzard's going rate is on this side. It's none of my business. But I would anticipate it's not too hard to get some enthusiastic community members lined up to give this thing a signal boost. And I think those are the missing factors for me. It was a lot of waiting, and it was all watching streamers talk to their chat while they waited for somebody else to figure out what was going on. I want someone put there by Hearthstone that knows what's going on for me. I want to watch that person. That could be you. That could be a caster. That could be Slissa. There are a lot of great people out there that I think would add some value there.
100%.
Yep. So that's mostly it for news. Oh, there's one more thing. The Blizzard NetEase situation is not going super well. There's some escalation. Blizzard apparently asked NetEase to extend the contract for 6 months while they negotiated another partner. That did not go over super well, and the NetEase office released a very strongly worded statement that compared Blizzard to someone that is getting a divorce but still trying to sleep with you, which is, strong language. But I understand that the things are tense right now. There was apparently a live stream of tearing down the orc statue in the China offices. Yeah, pretty intense, right?
Hear about that? Yeah, that is intense.
Yeah, so we don't really know what's happening here, but I think it's safe to say NetEase is probably not going to continue supporting the Blizzard property. So as of Monday, Blizzard products are outside of Diablo Immortal are not being supported in China. So we'll see what happens. But as of right now, it's terrible. It's a lot of really great players, a lot of people that have been invested for a long time. NetEase's been running the Blizzard games for 14 years in China. It's unclear what's going to happen. We know that Blizzard really wants to pursue this, and we're getting some pretty strongly worded statements from NetEase themselves, and we're getting vague allusions from Blizzard about what's happened. We don't really know the truth here, but we can say that NetEase is really not happy about it. So, yeah. Not really sure who dropped the ball, but let's just say this doesn't seem great for anybody.
Yeah, can agree on that. And the other problem is if you need a six months extension, right? It says that there's probably not something in the works right now. So
yeah,
hopefully it'll get resolved sooner rather than later. But yeah, not a ton of hope in that regard.
It's with a new company we might get somewhere there, but this is it's a question of who will want to pick this up now that NetEase has dropped it so hard. So
yeah,
we'll see. But we're here now at the end of the news section. Why don't we talk about Battlegrounds a little bit? I think you can do that.
Yeah, I mean, we got the patch.
Have a good battle, friend.
Thanks, Bob. I will. We got the patch. All right. Early first impressions. So much has changed. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and they were like, without quests, it feels like there's so much going on. And I had to wrap my brain around that idea because quests seem like a really big complexity increase, but they just tell you what they want you to do up front and then you do it. And now we're back to some good old board-based, build-based gameplay, which we know everybody loves. So I want your brief first impressions of the format. I know you've been traveling. You snuck in a stream yesterday. Tell me a little bit about how it's feeling to you.
Well, I mean, the first impression, everything, like I said, I did like a 9-hour patch review. I was pretty close on the predictions. Undead, really good. Really good. I was wrong. I will say, I thought Undead were going to be the most broken new minion type that Battlegrounds has seen on release. Quillbore and Naga obviously were extraordinarily strong when they were released. It didn't top Naga. Naga were a proper tier 0 in Battlegrounds, which is the only time that we've seen that, right? We haven't had like a lot of tier 0 where literally all 8 players were playing Naga. And we actually had the Lobby Legends had a tournament right on that patch, and it was insane to watch because everyone was going for the same build. Like it did not matter anything else. It was just Naga.
Did you find Stormscale Siren? Like Stormscale Siren was the magic thing.
That's it.
Yep. And
did it.
The only thing I can think of that might be close is Ginny Bug Elementals. When they moved Ginny down. Yeah. So for those that weren't around back then, Gentle Ginny used to be a 6-star unit. They moved it down to a 5-star unit. But it was supposed to respect the tier that you were on in terms of what it would drop. And it didn't. And there was an EMEA tournament where people were tripling on 4, hitting Ginny, and then getting 6s and steamrolling the lobby. But that was based on a straight-up bug. Naga was just overtuned. There was just too much going on there. And yeah, I agree. I watched the early stream. I'm like, oh, the board never dies and every minion has 50 power. This is crazy. But having played with it a little bit today, like, you can build enough health as one of the 2 players that's not trying to force undead in any lobby. You can get there with Murlocs. You can get there with elementals of all things, with dragons. You can kind of get there. So it's still really powerful. They're going to nerf some stuff. But I don't think it is a historical outlier the way that we've seen, like, Naga as an example launch.
Yeah, it's still extraordinarily good. So through my games, I think I've only top 3'd, and I've pretty much just been forcing undead, but I did get a win with APM Pirates right before I came on here. So it's possible. But yeah, they're really good. And the other thing is they're a little bit more complex. Like you said, Naga was like, find Stormscale Siren. Sit there, win the game. Pretty good. There's a little bit of decision making on Undead, like building the right board, and there's a couple different viable builds and stuff. So maybe we'll see it like get a little bit stronger as people actually figure out how to play it a little more. That's sort of what I expect. But yeah, off the bat, day 1, mostly Undead, but not 100%.
Yeah, there's clearly some powerful stuff going on. But before we even get to there, do you miss quests? How does it feel without quests?
I'm gonna miss them in like 10 days. I miss them, but like I'm good right now. Like we're figuring this stuff out. But they really did had such a great component to the game. One of the games I've been playing sort of in the downtime of the patch is TFT, and I got hooked on TFT in set 6, which is when they introduced augments. And quests are very much like augments in TFT, where they just add variety to the game that gives it more replayability. And so I was a huge fan. It felt like they were adding balance and they could impact stuff, and I really liked they sort of did like a halfway patch with quests where they added a bunch of new quest rewards, and it felt like it freshened stuff up. So Mitchell said they're coming back, and I'm just waiting for when they come back. Like, at least I know they're coming back at some point.
It seems like a really great mechanic to have in your back pocket and do for like a BG mini set. Just throw quests back. And like, it doesn't have to be that way every time, but there have been a few times they brought prizes back. And I know that people had very strong feelings about buddies. But everyone, when they first got Partner in Crime, freaked out It's one of my favorite moments is watching Nina play 43 lobbies, and on her 43rd,
Yeah, I was in those games. I remember. I
oh man,
remember.
she screamed
That
so
was
loud you could hear it on your stream. It was
yeah.
it was fantastic. So just seeing that moment of joy of the novelty coming back, because quests were really nice, but you don't want them to get stale because then you lose the value they can bring. So I'm really glad to hear that they are coming back. Well, let's talk undead. We talked about their power compared to other tribes on release. What do you think the best version of the undead strategy looks like?
There's a few. So there's two cards. There's two cards. If you go through my patch notes, I kind of highlight them. Those are Anubarak and Eternal Summoner, the 6-drop that summons 2 Eternal Knights. Those two cards kind of alone can really just build an undead board. The Nubarak, if you guys don't know, is the tier 5 death rattle that gives all your undead wherever they are. That means a shop, your hand, on your board, and if they get summoned during combat, +2 attack. And that means that all those reborns, the Divine Shield reborns, Blanchie, our new horse friend, they're all getting that bonus attack, and it recurs every combat. And if you use Macaw, if you use Titus Rivender, the new Baron, you can really accelerate that scaling, and it is extraordinarily strong because then you don't need it's just sort of passive scaling. You don't need to invest resources into it. And Eternal Summoner, which is a return of a beloved mechanic or adjacent beloved mechanic, Pogo Hopper. Rather than the battle cry of being summoned, Eternal Knight cares about itself dying. It gets +1/1 for each copy that's died during the game. Eternal Summoner summons 2 of those, and it just sells scales. I mean, the fact that it's an 8/1 on 6, it's already high tempo. Summoning 2 4/1s, well, a 4/1 and a 5/2 at base, and then continuing to just scale again without any resources needed to play into it is extraordinarily strong, because a lot of times it's summoning much bigger units than 4/1s and 5/2s. It's something like 23/20s or sometimes much higher than that if you have a really good setup.
Yeah, what I've seen a lot, especially if you can find a way to get reborn on the summoner, there are times you'll spit out 4 to up to 8 Eternal Knights from the same unit, from the same summoner, because you end up with, you have a Rivendare, and you double the amount of Eternal Knights, and then it comes back. And so it honestly makes the poison nerf look a little strange, because you can tell it was clearly a sentiment nerf, and now boards
Right.
are nested. They're layered. You have to chew through so many different minions that poison doesn't feel quite as powerful anymore. And Murlocs, like, even tier 4 Toxfin Murlocs, I don't think would be all that special right now, because you have to kill 20 plus minions to get through an entire
Right.
board. When Undead is fully firing, it feels really distinct. It feels very different from what we've had before. Maybe you can get a mech board with Kangors or whatever that felt kind of similar, but it still wasn't quite as recursive as this.
Yeah, and I mean that is kind of the idea behind the minion type. I again, like, I'm not super concerned about balance. It'll even itself out, but that is why it is a really cool tribe. Is before, especially in the last patch, when beasts and mechs were out, people would just have so many complaints about how all the end games are exactly the same. It's always just Murlocs, because you didn't have that sort of counter of a bunch of summons. And so now we have a third sort of summon tribe in Undead. The focus is on that reborn mechanic, but it is a lot in comparison. Like you said, it was mostly like mixed with a full setup, a full Exodia build where you have, Omega Busters summoning stuff, menaces on all your units, and those aren't even that big. A lot of times those are 1/1s, and but this is completely different. You have 20, 50/50 units coming at you, and you're like, how am I getting through this? Does it ever end?
Well, it's interesting, like, you'll see a lot of 52s, 51s. It's because if you get
Yeah.
the Anubarak thing going, especially if you're scaling it with Rivendare, you'll get a ton of attack. The minions have no health, but it doesn't matter because you have 20 minions that all have plus 48 or whatever. So there's a unit that summons a reborn helping hand. What is this thing called? The Handless Forsaken. Should have
Yeah.
remembered that. It's a tier 4, 2/3 Death Rattle. You summon a 2/2 Hand with Reborn. Both the minion and the hand are undead. So that means this is 3 bodies that are all undead. If you've got plus 40 from a Nubarak, which is surprisingly straightforward to
Yeah,
get,
surprisingly easy to get there.
then you're talking about this one unit being 3 attacks and 126 attack. So you're basically
Yeah.
dealing with like a huge Divine Shield minion, like the biggest Bronze Warden you've ever seen.
And to hammer home your point, and to revisit quests, Volatile Venom was by far, it was not even close, a half placement better than anything else that all hovered within about like a you know 0.1% of a placement. It was like under 4. It was like a 3.95 average placement for Volatile Venom. So like not even close to anything else. A couple of procs of a Nubarak basically turns an undead board into a Volatile Venom board for like free. Just hitting the unit. And like you said, it doesn't continue to scale. That's like 3 or 4 procs. Once you get to 10, 20 procs, uh, it's so difficult to deal with. Because
Yeah.
it's just, you don't really care about the health when you have so many bodies, like you said, and divine shields and the reborns and death rattles. So, yeah, for
It,
sure.
it remains to be seen the specifics on how we're going to counter these strategies, and of course, there are going to be ways smart players will figure it out, and Blizzard will also figure it out because we're anticipating some changes. But before we get to what we're thinking is going to change, are there any units that you think are bait that you see people taking that maybe you would recommend avoiding in the Undead Tribe for now?
Uh, it's hard. Situationally, they can all be very good. I will say there's some ones that seem like maybe they're not like super like the best right now. Sister Death Whisperer is really, really strong. It is extraordinarily strong, but compared to some of the you know better uh, undead cards, it almost feels like out of place on some of these ending boards. You've got all these summons and everything that has super high attack, and all of a sudden, Sister Death Whisperer is sitting there at like a 2040, and you're like, oh, this kind of sucks. Like, it's not doing anything for me. Um, that card is sort of, I think it's going to be really good after the changes. It's still really good, but maybe not as good as people would hope for a 6 compared to some of the other ones. And then the 2/7 buff. This one blows me away because like it's one of those cards. This happens in standard sometimes too, where you're just like on paper, this sounds insane. Like a 2/7 buff is just like almost unprecedented, right? 9 total stats. The only thing that like compares really is Jug, and Jug has these conditions of having multiple minion types on board. The problem with Possessive Banshee is that it turns out on your final board, 2/7 is completely irrelevant. Like like it's this crazy amount of stats, and just so often because of the way undead is working right now, those stats are just completely irrelevant. And so it seems so good, but it's a bait right now for sure.
That makes sense. And you've picked the 2 units that prioritize buffing health over attack on undead, and it makes sense that they don't quite gel with the overall strategy when we're just trying to have waves of high attack units that you don't care if they die. And that's what it seems like. We're not looking for incremental advantage in terms of a little bit of a boost on one unit. We're looking for everything, the hordes of undead, to swell with power. I will also say from my personal experience, which is somewhat limited and somewhat questionable, something that stood out to me as a general purpose undead unit, Ghoul of the Feast. It's a 3-star, 2/4, Avenge 1, give a friendly minion of each type +3 attack.
That's
This is
a
both
good card to highlight.
it's very strong, and I found it is both a good card to take when you want to power level or when you want to punish power leveling, which probably means it's overtuned now that I think about it, now that I say that out loud. But
So you're saying it's a good card? Is that what you're saying?
that is what I said. I found that because there's actually a decent number of reborn minions early on, the 2/1 reborn taunt, micro mummies, whatever, icky imps, and all the mech things. Give a friendly minion of each minion type +3 attack for Avenge 1. Every time there's a trade, you get a smoking gun.
Yep.
That's
it is wild.
powerful. Yes. So
and it is extraordinarily strong for the reasons that you said, in that power leveling is really strong right now. The meta is sort of focused on getting these 5 and 6 drops that are really good direction, and being able to level without worrying about taking too much health chip is so good. And Ghoul of the Feast is kind of a 1 card do it all. It doesn't really matter. You can have junk on your board, because Avenge 1, it's gonna die, and all of a sudden your board gets extraordinarily strong. And yeah, you just level for free.
Yep. Or punish someone that's trying to do that and hit him for 1 billion. It's entirely possible. So, if you were the one that was driving the bus on changes, because we know we're getting a patch next week and there's always Battlegrounds changes, where would you start?
It's a tough one. I mean, the tuning is so hard because so much of it is based on these small buffs, and you can't changing a new reactor +1 attack kind of kills it, right? So how do you balance it? Is it a 6 drop? Then you probably get it too late. That one's gonna be a really tough one. Ghoul of the Feast, I think that one is a prime candidate to just make it +2 attack, see how that goes. Maybe that's good enough. +3 attack just very clearly excessive in that regard. And then Eternal Summoner definitely needs a base stats nerf. 8/1 is already a very good tempo line when it's summoning stuff. So I would expect to see the attack come down on that, so that honestly, at something like a 3/1 or a 2/1, it's probably still very strong, given how good the continued scaling of the summons in Eternal Night are. Colossal of the Sun, extraordinarily strong. I think there was probably some desire to have Colossal of the Moon be there, and they're like, wait a sec, 10/10 Divine Shield Reborn? No. Turns out 6/6 Divine Shield Reborn is still very, 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 very good. We saw Illustra a long time ago as a 7/7 get nerfed down to a 3/3 Divine Shield Reborn. Obviously, it had that sort of pseudo taunt effect, but it was still too strong as a 3/3. Colossal of the Sun might not get hit as hard, but that's a prime target for tuning as well.
Yeah.
Just so generically good.
I think the approach that I see here, the common thread, is just make it easier to get under undead. Make them a little slower, make them lose a few more combats when they try and power level and go for their thing. Because they're supposed to be slow, shambling, powerful in the late game. That is kind of the fantasy that we're capturing here. That can be okay. There are ways to beat it, but it can be okay for them to be a good late game tribe. The question is, how quickly do they come online? How large is that window? How much time do I have to play offense? And that seems to be the opportunity.
the stall that you're talking about is a big component because so much of Undead it doesn't have that incremental scaling outside of a couple cards, right? But it's not like Caligos or Athissa where you're using resources, you're cycling stuff to get your scaling up, right? Even Sister Death Whisper, they're all sort of passive scaling where it's not much about investing resources. And so what that does is it makes it play a bit more like an Exodia comp. Something like the former, Eliza Scallyway comp where to build the board, it's more important to assemble all the pieces, right? You get the right cards on board and then just let it be. You don't have to do too much. And so reducing the time that you have to assemble those pieces of Exodia is probably the way that you handle uh, the tribe overall. But it is a tricky one because they already are, relatively low stats on a lot of them, and the effects can only, take so much change. So it's going to be an interesting one. But yeah, I expect to see a lot of stat tuning to try and address that.
Makes sense to me. Yeah, stat tuning seems to be. I mean, that's kind of the way that they have to go because the mechanism of undead, your stats kind of multiply in terms of effect because you see them a few times. So it makes sense that the impact
Yeah,
there
for
would be
sure.
pretty dramatic. So we talked about heroes a little bit earlier. I don't trust HS3 play stats yet because it's very, very, very early, and also it turns out the heroes that got hot fixed out are pretty good. But are there any heroes that you think really got a lot better? Any that you think got notably worse? Any standouts that people should be looking for?
I mean, a lot of the heroes that were good prior to quests are going to, be standouts once again. Reform, while it's not Tesser Scabs, does get that boost of that sort of tier one meta where everyone's playing undead. You're gonna probably get good stuff from Reform, so that's looking really good. I saw some pretty crazy Deathwing setups with all the summons. Deathwing just a huge um beneficiary. Of course, maybe not too much as it's also buffing all your opponent's summons. So if they hit just a little bit better, they'll be doing all right. But overall, I think the heroes that are really going to struggle are the same ones that we've seen struggle for a while now, and those are the ones that you just get some stats for pressing a button because at the moment stats just feel so irrelevant. What is your 3/3 from Rakinisha gonna do when it just gets pinged off by some random reborn? See, highlighted Cthulhu, like it's not likely to be enough right now. And so, stuff that's gonna be able to control your direction, um, Cookie, the new Galewing, which is super interesting redesign, by the way, or revamp more like on that one. Where you can sort of lean in to that undead stuff. Probably gonna be pretty good. Certain things like Sneed, probably a lot worse. It's just like, I like preaching thinking about the game, right? And so obviously undead are strong now. So thinking about what is, gonna be able to make undead work, what doesn't work with them. Wants to highlight Graybo, very good. George, very bad, just because summons counter shields and Graybo gets buffs on all summons. So,
Yeah, I
just
played against a
breaking it
Graybo,
down
and
and
it
thinking
seemed
about it that
like
way.
a notable improvement to how Graybo plays. Like a significant. Felt like Graybo was threatening whenever I came up against them, and that is definitely a
Yeah.
new thing.
Yeah. Graybo gonna be like, kind of from that like, oh, it's standard one to this is a strong hero now. Actually, an interesting one is Nazoth. I curious to see if people make any crazy Nazoth boards with the fish. I don't know if it's good. I just, it just, there's opportunity for cool things to happen there, and I always got my eye out when that's the case.
Feels like there's something that someone's going to exploit and leverage there. As far as non-undead tribes, if you were going anything that wasn't undead, if you wanted to dodge the fight for Eternal Knights, the fight for the Knights, how do you think some of the other tribes are standing? Because I've personally done pretty decently with elementals when no one else is going for them, because you can get some pretty beefy Gars and some pretty big Masters of Realities, especially with the new Magma Lock. Like, Magma Lock Master of Realities is a really, really nice 1-2 punch there. And I've seen some people still do pretty well with Murlocs, not for poison, but for health. I mean, you can get poisoned, but it's also really nice just for a bunch of cold light seers and whatever.
Yeah. Elementals I've seen have some success with similar stuff. Like you said, the interaction between Magmalock and Master of Realities has been really strong. Previously Major Domo sort of required an extra board space, and that was really difficult. Magmalock just puts it all in one unit, and so you don't need to worry about having 2 units to buff the elementals. You can have a couple on board, and it just scales really quickly. And like you said, time, a very big thing there. Uh, Naga was reported to have some success. If you get the right setup with the new Greta Gold gun, you can make some very high statted boards with sort of free golden Athysas. So that's one to look out for. And I have to say, Leapers with Blanchy. Okay, I gotta ask, what's your prediction for the nickname for Blanchy, Horsey? Like, where are we going with that? What's gonna be the accepted nickname for that minion? Because there's gonna be one. It's just what is it?
Yeah, no, I don't know. I haven't thought about it, but we're definitely gonna talk about it. Like, it's gonna be a thing that's around, because that card seems like it's gonna be pretty powerful for a while. Do the leapfrogger jumps count as buffs? Like, does it? So it comes
Count
back.
as enchantments. So if you get it on to the horse, it will reborn with more death rattles. And I haven't actually seen it like in play, just because the meta's been so dominated by um the undead, and leapers take a while to assemble, but it is absolutely still a comp that can compete with anything that got buffed with the addition of Blanchy. So I did get a second with leapers, I want to say. So it's possible.
Yeah, I definitely feel leapers were the thing that I was the most concerned about going into this patch, because it's a bunch of death rattles and a bunch of scaling. And there's still the opportunity to be concerned about it, but I mean, it hasn't been as popular yet. But we see this a lot, where the popular thing and the good thing aren't always necessarily the same, and people might have just stopped leapering for a little bit just because they're less interested in it, because they've been leapering for a while. But I do think that we're going to see some leapers.
It is true, and there's definitely always this side effect of a new minion type being in the game. It ends up being in every game, so it is sort of overly represented, and you kind of lose track of like how the proper breakdown is of other compositions, right? Where you might be like, wow, I just am not seeing any dragons. And granted, dragons probably aren't that good right now, but they're just in less games. Like most games, you're not going to be able to see dragons because games they're out, and 5 minion types will be banned, and 4 will be in, not including undead. So, more likely than not, any given tribe is not in a game, so it can get a little bit, your mind sort of favors what you see, and it's a little bit confusing. the first like month or so that undead will be in the guaranteed in the lobby.
Yeah, it's and remember, like, the patch has been out 36 hours. Like, people don't necessarily know everything that's good quite yet. But all right, this is the part where if we're getting advice to give to new players, what do I do? Number one thing that we start with is leveling curves. For newer players, for people that are maybe just coming back to BGs after a little while off, what would you recommend we do? Is this just a basic curve situation where we're leveling on 4 gold, 7 gold, 9 gold, or do you see some opportunity for other stuff to work?
Yeah, I think at the very early game, like staying on 1 probably not good right now. There's less econ than ever before. Undead didn't get any econ 1 drops, so especially when they're guaranteed in, it's not really good lobbies for that overall, unless you're a specific hero that likes that curve. 3-on-3 is always one to keep an eye on, because the more it really plays itself up. The more people that go 3-on-3, the more incentivized you are to as well, because you're not going to take damage when you face the other player that's going 3-on-3. So you see that level tier icon pop up next to their portrait, and you're like, yeah, sure, let's do it together. We're in this as one. And I think it's gonna be decent right now. There's not like standout threes, but just the natural acceleration, if you don't find anything good, of getting to those higher tiers right now is really good, because if you don't have that set up for a triple or like something in mind, you might as well, go to 3. Maybe you find Ghoul at a Feast, or just something just a bit stronger to stabilize your board and get up to tier 5 and 6 faster.
And for those of you that might not know what 3-on-3 is, just to clarify, 3-on-3 is when you buy on 3 gold, you level on 4 gold, and then you sell and level on 5 gold. It's tier 3 on turn 3, hence the name. And that is
absolutely
when people are trying out new stuff, they often get a little greedy, and you can often get away with doing that yourself. And that means that on your 6 gold turn, you get 2 chances to buy tier 3 minion. It can be quite powerful if you hit the right stuff. And you get to almost build your own AFK in a way. So it can be pretty strong, and I found myself doing that lately. I did that early on in the quest meta too, and until people started playing for tempo again, it worked out pretty well. Have there been any more adventurous curves that you've tried out that have worked for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I really do love playing all curves, but I don't think there's been anything too stand out. I will say that in terms of like deviating from the standard leveling patterns, it's less of a deviation, but going to tier 4 and 8 gold, I've been doing quite a lot, and I think a lot of high MMR players do generally do that. And then also, depending on the hero and your board setup, and how much health you have, what you're working with, going to tier 5, sometimes as early as 9 gold, just to open up the possibility of hitting something like a Nubrax super early. You just start that scaling. It's passive. You don't need to invest a ton. It's not something like Hogger or Nomi, where it's going to take a couple turns to come online. Like, you'll start seeing the fruits of your labors much quicker if you can hit. And so if you can, how I like to frame it is like, if you can give yourself an excuse, right? Like, I'm healthy enough. I have this strong board. Like, if you can find a reason to do it and explain it away, you can do it. If you can't find any reason, you're like, I need to survive, then hold off. But otherwise, getting to tier 5 pretty early has been pretty good for me so far.
That makes sense. Yeah, you look at the tier 6 triples, and when your worst one in Undead is Sister Death Whisper, you're in a pretty good place as a tribe, because even though we talked about how it might not gel with the rest of the strategy, it's also pretty powerful. You triple into it early, and your stuff's still going to grow. And you can either roll with that or you can pivot to something else, but it's still worth pursuing most of the time.
Yeah. One big struggle I will note that I've heard people complaining about is that when you get into these metas that are focused on a few core cards, especially high tier drops, what happens is you become very triple centric. So picking up pairs and stuff like that is going to be very important in this meta. And when you hit those triples, we can talk about the happy path, the path of least resistance, where you just hit Eternal Summoner, and like you don't have to do anything. It's straightforward, all good. But if you miss and you hit something like Toxin or Eliza, there's just like these misses on 6. Sometimes you'll hit an early Nadina. You don't have any dragons. You don't have the setup. It feels really bad. One thing that's important to keep in mind is just because you missed doesn't necessarily mean it was the wrong play. Sometimes the RNG just isn't on our side, and so making sure that you understand, like, yeah, this probably was a good play, but it didn't work out. It's important to differentiate that in these metas, because there are going to be more misses than there were in the past, just because other things are sort of relatively weaker. Eliza isn't really a comp anymore, and so what previously was like a really nice high tempo hit is a tad worse now.
Now that is some high level advice of just because things didn't work out doesn't mean you shouldn't do it again, and doesn't mean that that you're particularly lucky or unlucky. Sometimes you just get there, sometimes you don't. That is the nature of Discover. That is the nature of Hearthstone sometimes. Is there anything that we missed that we think can help new players adapt to BGs other than queue up, have fun, try some stuff?
Vision. Vision is like a huge thing that is really difficult. This is something that I've had people asking me for 3 years. Playing Battlegrounds is, going from the early game to the mid game to the late game. Like how do you do it? These high level players just seem like, everything happens super naturally. Like how'd they hit that? Like, you know, and the reason why it works out for them is because usually they have a vision of what their end game board will look like in any given game. And so when they're making their decisions earlier on in the game, you can play into that, perfect world, that vision. And so if you set that up as your goal, you can play, early on and say, okay, undead are really strong. I want to play in the undead. How do I get there in the early game? How does that get me to the mid game, and how am I making my decisions? Versus, trying to later on make a transition because you set up a board full of Murlocs and all of a sudden you're like, how do I get to undead? I can't make this transition. Well, if you have that vision from the start, that idea of what you're doing, and sort of use that as a guiding principle, and then use that same question we talked about earlier, like, why should I deviate? Like, is there a reason to deviate? And if the reason is, hey, you hit Golden Hogger and maybe APM Pirates is an out here, or maybe Leapers is an out, like, okay, if you have a good reason to deviate, then go do it and trust yourself, believe in that path, and go wholeheartedly down it. But otherwise, stick to your plan if you can't find a reason to deviate. And so having that sort of blueprint makes the game come much more naturally. And then as you get more familiar with, like, okay, now I know how to play undead. Now I know that path. And now I know the path of dragons and murlocs. And then things start to get more fluid, and that's when you can get into these transitions back and forth in between comps of saying, oh, I have this card, and so maybe I can swing this way or that way. Or, hey, look, I actually have divine shields of 3 different minion types. Maybe I can play into a Theatar here. And so as you gain that experience moving in between these comps, it gets easier and easier, and you'll be able to recognize those decision points to go into different paths much easier, and the game will feel easier and it'll get a lot more fun. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that was a very big brain answer. Thank you for that. And kind of opened up my eyes a little bit because I haven't played a ton of BGs necessarily. When I do, I can find those end game board states, but the path to get there is always what eludes me. So it makes sense that when you learn more recipes, you see more possibilities when you open the fridge.
Yep.
Because they're...
Oh my god, I'm stealing that.
Oh,
I'm stealing that metaphor. That's perfect.
Because it's just the idea of, well, if I don't know how to cook, then I just open and I see a bunch of not food. But when I have an idea of this thing or that thing, and maybe they can go together. Yeah. Now I'm hungry and I want to play BGs. Thanks, Pocky. It's your fault.
I'll take the blame on that one.
Yes. Well,
yeah, no, that's exactly it.
Well, I think we're going to wind down the show here. But we had an action-packed, knowledge-packed 80 minutes here. Thank you so much for coming on. And patrons, thank you so much for listening in. I know it's a bit of a departure from our usual format. We don't have any Joce giggles. We'll have to see if we can pipe them in from previous episodes. But we really appreciate you rolling with us here. We send all of our love and energy and positive vibes and unicorn gifts to Joce. Feel free to tweet them at her at JocePlays on Twitter. So you can, we're supported directly by our Epic patrons. You can become a TAC patron by going to patreon.com/TAC. Becoming a TAC patron gives you access to the TAC Discord, other perks. We have amazing producers, Dustin C. and Jared F. Thank you so much for the support. Follow the show on Twitter at TAC Podcast. We're going to be live Wednesday nights at 8 Eastern, twitch.tv/JocePlays right here on the usual channel. Pocky, where can we find you if we want to get more BG's information?
Twitch, of course, twitch.tv/Pocky Plays. My home base, Twitter, I'm very active on. I believe I'm Pocky_plays on Twitter. And every other social, I'm either, Pocky_plays or Pocky Plays, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, we got it all. So yeah, just any search, and you can, on my Twitch profile, there's links to all of it. And so if you are interested in learning more, if you have any questions on anything I went over, I love interacting with newer players, explaining, not only, what's good and stuff, but like how to think about the game, how to improve at the game. I really, really love having those conversations. So please feel free to stop by and pepper me with questions.
I might just have to do that myself. Thank you so much for coming on. You can find Joce. She's over at Joce Plays on Twitter. She's taking a little hiatus from here from The Gamers In, but The Gamers In is her other podcast. They just talk about video games. It's a fun show. You should go check that out. And you can find me, well, the hub of my internet content is twitter.com/ridiculoushat. I have two other Hearthstone podcasts, Coin Concede and Vicious Syndicate. Coin Concede is making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you, and Vicious Syndicate is a data-driven look at the high-level Legend metagame over in the standard side. This will be the most I talk about BGs this week, but man, I'm going to go play some right after this show. So, thank you so much, everyone, and until next time, job's done. You say that now.
Done. Thanks for having me on.
Yay! All right, you can stop your local recording. Everyone, we did it. My first Joceless episode of The Angry Chicken. I think. Did I do one? No, I've done some with Garrett, and I've done some with Vigil, but still. Pocky, you were an excellent co-host. I'm going to have to go back and listen to this because I felt myself getting smarter as I heard you talk.
It was fun. I didn't even get to talk about everything I wanted to. There's so many things. I just yeah.
We'll just have to stay tuned in.
Your fault. That's
There's just a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. We didn't even talk about dual minion types, which I think is like one of the biggest changes that come.
It's fascinating and it's huge, and there's a lot. Like, there's just trying to convey everything that happened this patch, especially here in The Angry Chicken. We wanted about the accessibility and trying to cover everything. You end up with like 2.5-hour shows, and I've done those 2.5-hour shows, and like my brain just turns to mush by the end, and it's very, very hard to follow. So I'm grateful for you to shepherd us through just learning at a level that I think will be fairly approachable, because that's the most important thing here. So everyone in chat, Thank you so much for being here. We're going to bring the stream down now, but please go to twitch.tv/PockyPlays. Go follow right now. Go do it. Talking to you. Go do it. All right. Bye.